So I'm Sally Beaumont. I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker actually for over 30 years in the field of fostering and adoption. Children that are in care, of which there's 82,000, of those there'll be 3% that will end up being adopted. So you can see for most children, the plan is for them to return back home. For that small proportion, though, that means that they've exhausted all opportunities for them to remain within their family and extended family. And children will come into care, usually in a crisis, actually, because there's been an element of disruption and trauma that has affected their lives because their parents have been unable to cope. So it could be typically because a parent has had a mental health breakdown. It could be because there's alcohol or drug misuse within that immediate family as well. And because all areas of support in terms of helping that child stay within their family have been eliminated. So it's now become unsafe for that child to remain at home. So a child or children will come into care essentially as an emergency sometimes, but also planned if there's a set period of rehabilitation for that parent. But for some children, that assessment period will extend and they'll need a little bit longer in foster care. So normally that foster placement has been found within the local area as well. So that will help the child maintain their links with their school and their friends and also with their family, because we have contact as well, family time that those children will have with members of their family still. So coming into care is still a last resort. And, you know, we hope very much that children will be supported to continue those links and then to return back home. So typically we would see that some of our children would have speech and language delay as well, some global development delay. They're maybe not as able to run, hop and skip as our other children because they've not had the same stimulation, in that trauma, lack of security, stability hasn't been there in those really important, crucial years. So we have to help support them to catch up. But essentially what we're looking for in terms of the adults that put themselves forward is that they've got an understanding of where the children have come from. The training that adopters and foster carers receive is very much about the theory, understanding what trauma means in terms of how it's affected the children. And then what we're looking for in our fostering applications and our adopters that come forward is the time and the nurturing to be able to make sure they can make a difference to those children, to really want to bring those children on from where they were as well. And that's part of the reward, a big part of the reward actually, in terms of helping children to reach their potential. You might be surprised that it's not quite so restricted as you may have been thinking, because we don't have an age restriction. Having said that, you know, we do have medicals, and you need to have certain amount of energy to look after children and everything that they bring. But also, you know, we want our children to have the longevity of having carers, be they temporary or via adoption, for many years to come as well. So the medical will be important for that. And in terms of a lower age limit, it's 21. Something that often comes up is around space. Have you got the space to look after one child, two child, huge sibling group? That is a consideration. And most agencies will specify that they do need you to have a spare room, and that's in adoption and fostering. But this doesn't mean that you have to have, you know, a huge townhouse, 3 stories, and it doesn't mean that we'll rule you out if you have a flat. It's about access to green spaces. It's about having opportunities to get outdoors in the local area. So don't think if you're, you know, in a flat and you have got a spare room that you're going to be ruled out. That doesn't count at all these days. In terms of what would rule you out immediately, well, I think most people would appreciate that if you have offences against children, you're not going to be the right people to look after our vulnerable, traumatized children. But if you do have some, say, traces on your DBS, that's the criminal records check that's undertaken, it may be that they were committed when you were a juvenile. So yes, we do have to explore that. So it's always worth discussing, and you can make time at that preparation appointment as well, just to talk to your agency discreetly. They always have people that are there to help and answer questions. Now, you don't want to raise that publicly, but you can make an opportunity to speak to them one-to-one. Now, certainly in adoption, it's really important that you've got the time to help a child settle into your family, because this is going to be a permanent arrangement in adoption. So we need to make sure that you're able to at least have 6 months, but often employers will honour the fact that you can have adoption leave for up to 12 months. And that's really important in terms of being able to adjust to having a new child in your family. I think a difference in fostering is that, yes, you still need time, but there is more flexibility. The fostering is much more about your profession as a foster carer. So there is an opportunity there for you to be able to still work. And agencies that you might join will ask you about whether you work term time, part time, whether there's one or two main carers, but not necessarily do you need to be there 24/7. That's dictated a lot by the age of the children that you're going to look after, because in fostering, it could be between 0 and 18, sometimes beyond. So some of those arrangements for much younger children, common sense would say you need to be at home. But certainly for children of school age, there is more flexibility there. There's different ways to adopt. You can adopt through your local authority, that's your council, or you could adopt through a voluntary organisation, such as Coram, for example. I think if you're looking at the difference between the two, it's worth very much looking at how long that independent voluntary organisation has been in existence as well, and also the support. How long is that support going to be available? Is a big consideration, because although when you first start adopting, there's a lot of wraparound support, and then the placement becomes more stable normally. But also there will be times when you're parenting, like most parents, that you'll need some additional support. And the fact that you have adopted children means you've got some access to different opportunities for support. And for example, some of those voluntary agencies will very much say that the support is a lifetime commitment. So it doesn't mean that once the child has been adopted that the support stops there. You have opportunities to attend training, support groups, social events as well, and there's separate support groups for children as they go through the developmental ages as well. So I think you feel very much more a part of that adoption community. Now, you can still access those services through the local authority, but obviously they've got many other areas of responsibility as well. So sometimes finding your way through to get the right support can be a bit more of a challenge, but you will still get support. So once you've decided on which agency you're going to go with, where you've got your preference, if you're still keen, you will then ask for a registration of interest form. That's a bit like, it's a strange word really, but basically it's an application form. So you fill that out, and so then we move into stage one. Stage one is all about, quite tedious really, but one would hope by then that you understand all the reasons for that. It's very much about the checks being completed and references being completed. So there is a time frame around that of about 8 weeks, because the whole assessment process from application to panel should be within 6 months. Now, give or take, sometimes there's a few documents that don't come back very quickly, but overall that's the time frame that we're looking towards. So that stage one is all about the checks and the references and all the statutory stuff that we have to complete. The next stage would be to have the remaining part of the assessment completed that takes it up to that 6 month stage. So that's very much more about having an allocated assessing social worker that will work with you to look at all the areas that need considering in terms of becoming an approved adopter and going to panel. And it will be intrusive in terms of some of the information in your own childhood, life to date, relationships, all of that might well have an impact on how you then tend to parent, because we're looking for a child that's best suited to joining your family as well. What's going to be a good match? Once all this document, which is a two-way arrangement, is completed, and you've got some experience, if you haven't already, in terms of looking after children, then you would move to the adoption panel. That's called the approval panel. And that panel will meet on a regular basis, and you would attend that panel with your worker that by now you've got to know quite well. And there'd be a recommendation about whether to approve you or whether sometimes they defer because they need a bit more information. And that then means that you're approved adopters. You become approved and waiting adopters. So family finding can be adopter-led. There's lots of help you'll get to try and find children through different means. You can attend the National Exchange Days. That's where you'll see current details of children profiled, paper profile, and you'll be able to speak to many social workers that will be there from different agencies as well. So that's one very popular means of finding a child for your family. Another important area is, and it may be that this is your preferred means of family finding, but you may want to go to an activity day as well, an adoption activity day. That's a really good opportunity to find out for yourself whether that's a child that you think would really work well with your family, because you get a chance to see the personalities of those children as well, rather than just reading about them. So some children we know are very outgoing, they want to explore, they're busy around all the time with all the games that are on offer and all the interaction. There's other children that are quieter, that would rather sit and do some colouring. So that's the sort of information that you'll be able to pick up as well from attending an activity day. So as I said, the weight will be determined much more by the type of child that you're wanting to adopt. So if you are looking for a child that's part of a sibling group, if you're looking for a child that maybe has got some more complex health needs, for example, chances are that there'll be children that are ready and waiting to join your family. So that's another consideration as well. But most people will wait for their child to join their family. It's around about 8 months. That's the national average at the moment. So 8 months and then a month to go to matching panel. And most of the time that match is approved following that recommendation. And that means that that child is going to join your family. The exciting bit is generally we've got all the wheels in motion in preparation for that approval. And we call it transition. We're trying to help the child transition into their new family, their new adopted family, permanent arrangement. So we have to work really carefully on making sure that this child who is moving from foster care into an adoptive placement is prepared and supported to make that huge leap, more so depending on the child's age as well and how long they've been with their foster carer. So we help you to very sensitively help that child into your family. This is all before the adoption order, which is something that you apply for with the support of your assessing social worker. And the adoption order really is the acknowledgement that legally you are now the parent and have all the parental responsibilities for that child. It's moved from the local authority to you as the new adopters. So that would conclude the end of all of that process, matching, family finding, and yeah, ready to get on with family life. So in terms of support, which I did mention earlier, I think it's really reassuring for adopters to know, particularly say, for example, with Coram, that there is a lifelong commitment to that child and that adoptive family as a unit. So it could be that you're just phoning up the duty line for some advice about how to apply for a school place, how to access extra support through school, parenting support, whatever stage that your child is at. And there are social workers that can specifically complete those adoption support fund applications that all adopters are entitled to. It's not means tested or anything like that. So that's a really good gateway to additional services. It could be art therapy, it could be, as I said, the therapeutic parenting support when children are older as well, and sometimes adolescence is a time when extra support is needed in terms of helping a child to understand their own self-identity and what it means to them that they are maybe different to their friends in terms of how they came to be in their family. There's lots of additional support around that as well. And also hooking up with all the other adopters as well that you may have met when you did the training and the preparation, but also ongoing. And we do at Coram, there's a adopters picnic as well. It's a really good social event and a means of children meeting other children that are adopted, which is also very important. Fostering is also a means of looking after children, and fostering can be short-term, temporary, long-term, and permanent. All different sorts. There's a lot more variety with fostering. So if you feel as foster carers that you can commit to just providing some respite being short-term, might just be holidays. Respite is a good service for the local authority because it's a means of supporting those foster carers who have got longer term placements. So you become more familiar with those child and you provide regular, more natural arrangements in terms of a place where a child might go for weekends or some school holiday times or enjoy some holidays, breaks. Just means that the existing foster carer can re-energize as well, whilst the young people have, some great fun time out. In terms of the process for becoming a foster carer, there are many similarities with adoption, as there are differences. You would still, in this case, only approach a local authority or an independent fostering agency. That's your two choices. That's the two routes. The similarities there are much the same in that you would go to a preparation information event, sometimes online, sometimes face to face. And again, often they will have foster carers there as well that have been approved for a few years, that cover a whole age range, really, because some people will just look at providing placements to children that are primary school, junior school. Other foster carers will look at offering placements for teenagers. And as we know, there is a real shortage of placements for teenagers. So after that, again, similar in that you would be invited, if you're still interested, to complete a registration of interest form, similar to an application form. And the idea is that you provide all the details there that will help to complete stage one. Stage one being all the checks and references and everything else. And again, it's just to reassure you that you know that the assessment is going to be quite delving. It's going to look at your own education, your parenting style, your motivation, why you want to offer placements to vulnerable children, and all of those areas which will be covered in the assessment. So at this stage, which is called stage one, it's very much the preparation stage, and you will also be invited to come on the training to become a foster carer, which is essentially quite a difference from adoption because it will cover the whole raft of needs, managing family time, helping a child to get the best out of contact as well with their birth families, because that will still be very much a part of the plan at the moment, and how to support a child within school, as well as what we call de-escalation training as well, helping a child when they're finding it really difficult in terms of managing their behaviours, how you help them and support them to become more in control of their own behaviour, because they're in a crisis, aren't they? So they need all that extra support. So the training in fostering is all in that first stage. It's much rarer in the fostering agencies to split that training. So you do the training, all the checks are done in those first 2 months. And then if that's all gone well, then we would move into the assessment stage, which takes us up to panel, the fostering panel. So again, 4 months worth, can be less, but that's what we're measured against, is whether we've completed the assessment in 6 months or not. And you will go to the fostering panel. On that panel would be maybe an ex-looked after child, someone that's care experienced, a foster carer, a social worker. There's some statutory people that need to be on that panel, and they will read all of the paperwork, and they will look at the age range that you're looking to foster, and then they make a recommendation. And that recommendation goes to the agency decision maker. And if that's all followed through positively, then you become an approved foster carer. In terms of the children that you're likely to have placed with you, again, yes, they've all had different experiences, and they will come with their own trauma and their own needs and need that extra support, which you're going to access either through community support, therapeutic support, and the access that you can get via the schools as well. but you're providing that same security and stability to help that child to get over and come to terms with some of the trauma that they've had to experience in, their short lives already. And whether you choose to do that through a private fostering agency or the local authority, you will have a fee. There's an allowance that goes towards the child, all those costs in terms of food, school uniform, school trips, everything else that it costs to look after a child. And then there's your professional fee that you'll receive. Part of that fostering fee is to acknowledge that you are a professional worker, and as such you have to undergo training as well. So it's not an opt-out. In terms of adoption, it's encouraged to go on the training, but in terms of fostering, it's very much an expectation. So you will need to undertake quite a bit of training in that first year and beyond. And that's because every year as foster carers, you have an annual review, and it will look at the training that you've undertaken, and it will also look at the support. For many foster carers as well, they do convert into looking after children on a long-term permanent basis. And for some of those foster carers, they actually do end up adopting those children as well, or having a household that actually has got a mixture of their birth children, looked after fostered children, and there may be an adopted child within that as well. So you can understand that there's a lot of diversity there. There are many different forms of looking after vulnerable children and making a difference. That's what it's about. And you need to think about what's right for your circumstances, your existing family maybe, and how much time and commitment you can give to a vulnerable child that needs that catch-up time. It would be great if you come to bemyfamily.org.uk, where you can access all the links and all the information that's relevant to adoption and then fostering. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.